It is officially 9:00 a.m. on one of the coldest days of the year.
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and just announce quickly that this meeting is being recorded and will be available on our website within 24 hours of the meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and officially call the meeting to order. And we're going to start with adoption of minutes from the previous meeting. Rich, I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at these yet. I'll pass those down and give you a chance to take a look at them.
Since Rich was not at the last meeting, I would not recommend him sign them, or he was not on the board during the last meeting.
A quorum present can sign. Do it.
Okay, all right, so I move that we adopt the minutes from the December 9th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
And all in favor?
Aye.
With that, I will sign, since we were on the board at the last meeting. Rich, do you have the minutes? Let's go ahead and sign those. And so now we're going to move on to ranked choice voting for the June primary. So the Arlington Democrats had their membership meeting Wednesday, and they voted to hold a primary. So that primary is going to be for county board races.
Okay, so and as I believe most people are aware, in December, the County Board of Arlington passed an ordinance that all primaries being held in 2023 for the office of County Board would use ranked choice voting. So that essentially means that should we have 4 candidates file for County Board, for the Democratic primary, that we will be holding Virginia's first ranked choice voting election. I would say run by an office, a county or jurisdiction office. So, and at this point, we do have 5 candidates who have announced for county board. They have until April 6th to file, and it's too early for them to even file yet. They can start filing on March 20th. But we are anticipating that we would need at least 4 candidates to file to run an election using ranked choice voting, and we are anticipating that that will happen. So we are working closely with the Department of Elections to make sure that we have everything in place to conduct this election. The Department of Elections has contracted with a PR firm to develop materials for ranked choice voting. So I think it'll include like videos, signs, videos, signs, and I think the target audiences that they're looking at are voters and election officers. We anticipate learning more in late March, early April, and that's when we anticipate launching our outreach initiative here in Arlington County.
And I know that our vendor that we use, we can do up to 3. Is that
Yes.
still the
Yes.
case? Okay.
Yeah, so the voting machine vendor that we use has a limitation on how many candidates voters will be able to rank. So even if 5 candidates run, voters would only be able to rank their top 3 choices for second and third. This is a system limitation with the vendor that we have. And changing voting equipment is costly, and I'm not even sure it's possible because of supply chain issues with computer chips, certification, so there's just a lot of complications with completely changing a new system. One of the common assumptions with ranked choice voting when we do limitations is that limits the number of rounds that you can run. That is not true. Even if because you can only rank 3, you can still run through as many rounds as we need to. to get down to the last two candidates, either where they've crossed the threshold or there's only two candidates that remain. So I know there's been some concern that's come up that we'll only be able to do 3 rounds of tally. That's not true. You can do as many rounds as it takes.
So basically what would happen is that voters would choose their top 3. So even if there are 10 candidates, you choose your top 3 out of those 10 candidates, and then we'll run rounds, as many rounds as needed to get to that.
To have 2 candidates cross the threshold that's needed to win this election.
What is the threshold?
The threshold is on the wall. It changes based on the type of election. So in Arlington County, it's going to be 33% plus 1. Yeah. And the threshold is calculated based off of the total ballots cast in that office. And then you divide it by the number of open seats. So we do have 2 open seats plus 1. So if we had 99 ballots cast for this office, we would divide 99 by 3, which gives us 33 ballots plus 1, 34 to get the threshold. Does that make sense?
Sorry, what does the threshold mean?
The threshold means that's the candidate who wins needs to cross that threshold to be declared the winner. So once a candidate gets 34 votes in that scenario with 99 ballots cast, once the candidate gets 34 votes, they would have won the election. Or they could be declared the winner. So.
Just for the record, everything you mentioned is consistent with the briefing that we gave to the county board a year ago in October.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I find this fascinating, but it also seems particularly complicated in an election where there can be 2 winners.
Yes.
So every voter is allowed to make, in a sense, 2 first-place votes if they want.
No, you just rank your first, second, third choices.
But in the past, people have been allowed to make 2.
They would make 2 choices. But in this election, it'll be, you only have 1 ranking for first, second, or third. You can't, and it's all, because it's all in a pool office, then we don't have the office on the ballot twice. So, like, there will be a need for education and outreach, both for candidates who are running in the election and voters who are participating in the election.
Yeah, so think of it in terms of like oranges, apples, bananas. So if you are voting orange, apple, and banana are all running for county board, I would vote apple 1, orange is 2, banana 3. And that would be my 3 choices.
Where's my visual?
Yeah, and there's a visual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to rank apple and oranges as 1, if that makes sense.
So I know where Rich is probably thinking, but what happens if that first candidate to cross the threshold ends up getting a lot of votes? Have you essentially thrown away your vote by your first choice candidate being the first to cross the threshold? Well, the tabulation rules that the state adopted 2 years ago for ranked choice voting have what's called a surplus fraction. So once a candidate crosses the threshold, they're going to take look at all of those ballots, and the tabulation software will compute a fraction, and so it'll look at this next choice on those ballots, and it'll take a fraction of that vote and apply it to their second choice.
And I think I understand all that, but it just seems to me this is a different type of election.
It is.
In the past, because it used to be you could vote for 2 people.
Yes.
And now there will no longer be tickets of 2 people running.
No. Yeah, it'll be first, second, or third. And there will be a lot more to come. So, yeah.
I think it's also worth mentioning that I had occasion to be in the committee meeting room of the House Privileges and Elections Committee, and Delegate Hudson, who first brought this forward on a statewide basis, along with Delegate Popes, Bill particularly drawn to Arlington, tried to expand it, along with other members on both sides of the aisle, to constitutional offices, to members of the General Assembly, to President, in terms of Virginia's choices next year. and they've all been defeated.
Mhm.
And a delegate from Accomack, Delegate Bloxham, mentioned that he was waiting to see how things went in Arlington.
Mhm.
So I think we'll have much to share with the rest of the Commonwealth, and
Mhm.
the Electoral Board Association certainly remains, our colleagues remain very interested.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to seeing how well we can administer this process.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons why we are getting the support from the Department of Elections. I think everyone recognizes this is an Arlington specific issue, but there is interest across Virginia. So they really want to create tools and resources that are available to every jurisdiction in Virginia, rather than Arlington specific policies. So if we go back to the ranked choice voting slide, so we are developing, like I said, our outreach materials. That's really our focus in February and March, with a real launch in April. So in order to help develop these materials, if you do have specific questions about ranked choice voting, you can email us at our voters@arlingtonva.us email. And that will really help. We want to make sure that whatever is being developed are addressing the questions that we're seeing in our community. So this is your opportunity to help to make sure that we are developing the right materials. So.
That's good.
Thank you. So we talked, candidate filings, we did talk about that. They have until March 20th. 5 candidates have filed.
County board.
Yeah.
We do have other primaries.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, yeah. So here's where we are to date on candidate filings. So we do have, and this is where, like I said, nothing is official until they file, till they pay their primary filing fee and file all the paperwork. But these are people who have started the process with filing. So we have 5 for county board, 3 for sheriff, 2 for the 40th House Senate district. We did have a second filer in the second House district. He announced, but he has not filed any paperwork yet. And then we have an independent who's filed for the 3rd House district. Clerk of the courts, treasurer, commissioner of revenue. Have 1 Commonwealth's attorney. We only have 1 that has filed any paperwork with us, as well as school board. Okay.
Excuse me, Greg, just to clarify, the ranked choice voting is only for the county board?
Correct. And that's the way the law was written at the state level. It only applies to the county board office. So.
Thank you.
But just to add, that is Delegate Hope's bill. It was drawn particularly to Arlington. And that was enacted first by the General Assembly, and then Delegate Hudson's bill applies to the rest of the state for governing bodies if they choose to implement it.
And it's a pilot program through, I think, 2030.
10 years.
Yes.
So.
Okay, so now we have election officer appointments. So this is for a term of March 1st, 2023 to February 28th, 2024. Is it 20th or the 29th? 29th. The February
29th.
Yes,
My apologies.
No, that's all right. I just thought of that.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's the list.
Yeah, and so Tate has some numbers she can provide.
Yes, so the list is currently just over 2,900 people. And then we did receive lists from both parties. I don't have those numbers right in front of me actually, but I think the list from the GOP, I believe, was right around 35, does that sound right? And then from the Democratic Party, I believe it was right around 30. All of those names are on the list, except for there's 4 names from the GOP list that they haven't applied yet. And so I contacted them, let them know I didn't have an application currently in the system, so I can't have them on the list because I have to make sure they're a registered voter before you can appoint them. So once they apply, we'll add that onto the March meeting to have you approve of them then.
Fabulous. And then just to remind everyone that the electoral board in our last meeting agreed to accept nominations of new election officers 10 days prior to each meeting. So we're going to be doing that on a rolling basis throughout the year so that we can make sure that we're appointing people. So, all right, so.
Okay. Sorry, can I have a question on that? I heard in an earlier communication, I think from Gretchen, that there might be some follow-up emails to the election officers to remind them.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, so what we'll include, should the electoral board choose to appoint the list that we provided today, we will send everyone a notice of appointment email and we'll remind them that if they want to represent a party to go through the contact process that was laid out in December. If either party has any changes to that, we'll be happy to incorporate that into the message that's sent out.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed like there might have been a little confusion among some of the election officers.
There was definitely confusion, because I know one person individual CC'd me on the email and he sent it to the different email than the one that he was instructed to. But that is the process when you work with election officers, is there is always some element of confusion. So, yeah.
Okay.
I would say the most confusion came from people wondering if they had to elect to represent a party, because I would say the vast majority of our workers would like to remain unaffiliated, either because of their job or because that's their choice. So I got a lot of emails asking, do I have to represent a party? And the answer, of course, is no, you don't have to. So it's their choice.
So if I understand, there were 2,900 that are going to be appointed.
That's on that list.
Yes.
They'll all be appointed,
Yes.
and then they'll be assigned depending on the need.
Yes.
How many do we generally use in the general election?
This general election, we will use fewer than we normally use just because turnout for this election is the lowest of the 4-year cycle. So we'll use anywhere between 350 to 700, depending on how busy we think the election will be.
So the great majority of people on that list will not be used.
Yes.
How does that compare to last year?
In terms of staffing,
Yeah.
in November last year, I started off with about 550 and I ended up with about 475. And then last June, I staffed, it was like right around 250. It was
But the appointment list is always higher than, because we already have, for June, we've already had election officers tell us that and these are long-term workers but they are not available for June. So I would say the dropout rate from last November, we probably, at some point over that, how many people would you say you had assigned over the course of that?
If I had to add all like the rounds.
Yeah, everybody who
together,
dropped out.
over 700.
So we need a lot more, we need at least 1,000 names on the list to staff the general election, just because between now and November, we'll have people who move, people who have new jobs, who can't get the time off, who, for any number of reasons, just aren't going to be available to work.
I'm thinking ahead to next year. What's your recollection from 2020?
Well, 2020 was an election unlike any other election, simply because we really staffed polling places with 10 to 12 workers, but then by the time we got to election day, 80% of Arlington who was going to vote in that election had already voted, either by mail or at one of the early voting sites. So election day turnout was much lower than we've ever seen in pretty much any election that I will ever see. So I do not anticipate it being the same in 2024. One of the numbers that we do look at every year is how many voters are voting by mail, how many voters are voting early, and how many voters are voting election day. And we compare that to the previous election 4 years ago to see, and we are still increasing in voters moving from election day voting to voting by mail and early. And I haven't run the numbers yet for this year, but we've been increasing at a rate of about 100% for early voting and 300% for mail. So, and I anticipate when I go to do the numbers for this year that for 2023, we will probably be increasing at that same rate. So,
And if I could add, this cycle also
Please.
includes the March primary for next year.
Yes.
If there is one, which we assume there is, these officers would also be the list for that election as well.
Thank you.
Oh, would it be useful in the forthcoming communications to the election office, the reminders, to let them know that there would be some sort of preference for having the chief and the deputy chief be of different parties, of different affiliations? I mean,
So that's not, and so that's true of the general election. If we're looking at a Democratic primary in June and potentially just a Republican primary in
True.
March, that is not, because when you go to staff a primary, the preference is you give preference to people who have been nominated to represent that party.
okay, so it would be more for the general coming up in November.
Yeah.
It might be useful for people to know. That might encourage them to affiliate so that they might have a greater chance of being chief or deputy chief for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say there's not that much interest in being chief or assistant chief.
Really?
It's much harder to recruit chiefs than assistant chiefs, so. I would say it might have a reverse effect, so people say, well, if that means I can't be chief or assistant chief, then, yeah. So,
So with that, I move that we appoint those, that group of election officers for a term of March 1st, 2023 to February 29th, 2024, per code section 24.2-107. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, okay, thank you. Okay, and so now we're gonna talk about our training, electoral board training. So we have training that we are also required to do. So Rich, this is your first year, so you will have training that you are required to do. And so, Gretchen, you've got the info on that.
yeah, so it is on March this is where I need to look at my calendar. March 23rd. It's the end of March.
It's a Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah, it's whatever, yeah, hold on. 24th. Yeah, the 24th, 25th, and 26th. So, one of the new, recently, I think it was 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a bill passed that requires the newly appointed electoral board member to go through training. So Rich, since you're the newly appointed electoral board member, you will be going through your state training. And you will be doing that down in Roanoke on March 24th. And this is going to be held in conjunction with the Virginia Electoral Board Association's annual meeting. So, yeah. And all 3 members will be going at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I gather there's some required legislative training in July.
Yes, there will be a 1-day online legislative roundup, which I would recommend all members attend, because that is the best place to get a synopsis of new legislation that's been passed out in the last General Assembly cycle. And I mean, Scott's been down in Richmond. I would say there's probably not going to be too much new stuff this year.
It'd be nice to have a little bit of a break. Last year was a lot.
Yeah. So there, I'm trying to think. There was one that applied to election officers that's escaping me right now that looks good to pass, but
Well, there have been many bills that have passed the House of Delegates.
yes,
Not many are going to pass the Senate.
yes. And crossover was just last week, so we're starting.
No, it's
It's coming up.
Yes.
Sorry,
February
apologize. Yep. So, yeah.
And then are you able to go this year?
I am still confirming with my schedule. I will probably go down for the Registrar Association meeting. We'll be having a meeting on Saturday, so I'm going to try to be there for that. I probably can't go for the whole conference.
Okay,
So,
all right. Whatever works for you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much on that. And so now we are going to go into closed session. It is officially 9:25. I move that the electoral board go into closed session pursuant to state code section 2.2-3711A for the purpose of discussing issues related to appointment and performance of officers of election, personnel matters not related to public business, and security related to the locality, voter registration system security standards.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So,
Yeah, we That's where. That's why.
did you?
Oh,
no.
I feel like every seventh grader doesn't
Yeah.
like fraction.
Okay.
It's not seventh grade, it starts in fourth grade.
Really?
7-year-olds, sorry, 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
NPR News.
Precinct, the max 5,000.
That we're gonna.
Is it a set number?
At 5,000, I am required to tell the county board that a precinct has 5,000. I believe the code section is written so that if more than 4,000 show up to vote in a presidential election, then that precinct has to be split.
Thank you.
Oh.
It's up to the county board to create the.
Gotta find a place, right?
Thank you.
Okay, so it is 9:59. I move that the electoral board return to public session and certify that only public business matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So we are officially out of closed session and we're at the end of the meeting. And I just want to just really quickly address some items that were presented to us. You were asked for an update on proposed solutions to challenges that arose in November 22 elections around same-day registration. We're waiting to hear from elect, so we will address that in March. Hopefully they will have a response. There is also a request on the updated analysis and summary of the Dropbox used in 2022. We will also address that in March.
Well, I think perhaps we got a lot of people here today. If we have time, we should just allow people to any issues that anybody here wants to bring up is appropriate.
I think that's fine.
All right.
I actually had a small PowerPoint to present our analysis. I sent it to Tate.
All right, let's go ahead and do it.
Give us 1 second, we'll get those.
So before I have a quick question, Gretchen, about the, will your office be sending out a notice to voters on the permanent absentee ballot list to give them the option to, letting them know that they can opt out?
Yeah, so we have spent this winter actually creating a list of emails because mail rates have gone up this year. So we do have email addresses for a lot of people on the permanent absentee ballot list. So we anticipate sending them a notice in advance of ballots being mailed, letting them know that they are on the permanent absentee ballot list and they will be getting a ballot for the elections in which they've applied. So if they've applied for a Democratic primary, they'll get the primary ballot. And then if they would like to be removed from the permanent absentee ballot list, give them a link to that form they can fill out to be removed. So,
But
yeah.
only by email now? You're not going to do the letter?
Like I said, postal rates and paper shortages are real challenges facing election administration offices. So there's definitely still envelope shortages that will continue for 2 years to come. So,
Okay.
yeah. And the postal rates, I don't know if you've seen the postal rates, but they've really jumped this year. Yeah.
And more to come.
And more to come. So.
Okay. No, it was commendable that you had done that in the past, and we just wanted to check in there. And then if there was just the related question of whether there could be a sign at the precincts to inform the voters of the, like that we did in Fairfax last year, of, okay, if you're on the Permanowski ballot list, here's how you can opt out.
It was for Fairfax and Prince William.
Prince William
I think
too?
also.
Okay. And we're trying to get some feedback from them to see how that went, but I haven't heard. I think it went pretty well, but I don't know if that's something.
We will certainly ask our colleagues in Prince William and Fairfax how that went, so.
That'll be good.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Just let us know when you want us to proceed to the next slide.
John, did you? Okay, thank you. So just had a short presentation. As you know, we presented to the board last year a discussion about the drop boxes. So I think it was the decision of the board to observe further how the Dropbox use was being used in 2022. So we have an update, and so we'd like to present that. Next. Right, so we did that presentation in June last year, and this update has an update of results for 2022, the primary and the November election. So the current scenario, as of June 2022, Arlington County maintained 9 drop boxes for use in both elections. Open to accept ballots for 44 days up to election day. By law, Arlington must send 2 employees to the 9 drop boxes on each of those 44 days to retrieve ballots. And if I'm mistaken anywhere, Gretchen, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Must maintain 24-hour per day video surveillance of the drop boxes. And so in June, our team, election integrity team, conservatively estimated that the cost of ballot retrieval at $143 a day, not including video surveillance. And we think that inflation has caused an increase in the costs since then. So in the June 2022 primary, their vote count was 17,506. Of that number, 791 voters, or 4.1% of the total, deposited their ballots into drop boxes. The total cost of drop box maintenance was $6,300. So that came out to $8.76 per ballot collected for the June primary. But if we look at early deposited ballots, and what we mean by that are ballots that were deposited 10 days or more before the election, when voters could alternatively have placed it in the mail with about 100% confidence that those ballots would have arrived in time. If those are eliminated from the calculation, then the cost doubles to $17.50 per ballot. November, the vote was was 91,805, 2,362 voters deposited into the drop boxes, 2.6% of the total, 10,000 returned by mail, 665 in person. County costs were $2.67 to collect each ballot from the drop boxes, though again, if we limit it to the ballots that were deposited in the last 10 days, if we eliminate the ones from before that, it comes out to $5.34 per ballot. And so cost collection per drop box ballot was lower than in the June primary due to higher turnout, but the percentage of voters using the drop boxes continues to decline. So the trends, there's a noticeable trend in the last 3 general elections away from absentee voting and away from the use of drop boxes on a percentage basis. At the height of COVID, 37% of voters voted by absentee. Next. That dropped to 16% in November 2021, 14% in November 22. Similar drop in the Dropbox usage. 2020 was 9%, 2021 3.2, 2022 2.6. During the November 22 election, 2,360 ballots were collected from 9 drop boxes, less than 6 ballots per day per box on average. The significant majority of ballots were collected from just 3 of those drop boxes, Courthouse, Central Library, and Westover. Of the other 6, only 1,053 ballots were collected, equal to less than 4 ballots collected per day per box. So, given this analysis, our recommendation is that given the declining usage of drop boxes, considerable cost and effort could be saved by reducing the number of drop boxes countywide from 9 to 3. And then that could be reviewed annually to see if that is the correct number to maintain. This would have a negligible effect on voter convenience. However, it would reduce the potential for voter fraud and probably most importantly, would increase public confidence in election integrity, which we feel is critical to our system of government and our election operations. So that's coming from our election integrity team, our analysis and our suggestion. So we put that out to the board and to the election office. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Frank. So I do have some questions. Again, I'm looking at the 3 drop boxes that are the most used, and they're all in North Arlington. So South Arlington is left out of this equation, and that's a really big deal. Also, and this is something that I think we need to find out, how much where do we store these drop boxes if we remove them? And how much is it gonna cost to take them out? So I think that that's something that we need to take a look at as well. I'm looking to my colleagues here if they have any other questions.
So I think that would be an appropriate thing to ask Gretchen to do then, would be to take a look at this and see what she thinks. I mean, I've obviously expressed in the past my thought that there are better ways of encouraging voting besides drop boxes, but I would love to get your feedback on this and perhaps report back to us on this.
Okay.
That would be helpful, and I do share the thought that our chair expressed in reference to if there were a reduction in the number, that there be at least one in South Arlington. Very important, and I remember that also came up at the county board meeting. They were so concerned about, as I recall, so concerned about making certain there was geographical distribution that Mr. Carantonis even suggested perhaps another location for a drop box would also be appropriate and helpful, I think, particularly for my colleagues, but also as a refresher for me. Gretchen, how you came to select the number 9 and your consideration process that I'm sure was very thorough, but if you could help us on how you hit upon that number, any consultation that you made with individuals or groups in the community, and what makes sense going forward for this year. I recall that the presentation that Rich Chang made last year, number 3 was suggested for this year, reserving the right to go up more, go back to the current number next year if warranted, and whether we do, as always, will we do more or less, the same, different, or not at all is important. We do adjust the number, of course, as discussed, for election officials this year. Certainly it's appropriate to consider what makes sense in terms of anything for a given election cycle, making certain that we are properly staffed and equipped in every respect for every election cycle, given that we do, unlike most jurisdictions in the country, have candidates or issues on the ballot every year. So I think, again, that's certainly very appropriate to have all those factors brought before us, recognizing that the statute gives you the decision on that. And I can also share, as part of my Richmond report, the House of Delegates passed a bill which would eliminate drop boxes completely. I don't expect that'll pass the Senate this year. And so it's likely that they'll, I think, given what I see every day in Richmond, I would say 100% confident that there'll be a drop box matter to be considered this year and at least through 2024. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think there was a question over here first.
Yeah, I just really wanted to push back against the idea that it would have a negligible impact on convenience, especially for voters in South Arlington, if you take away the 6 other drop boxes, just because people walk to those, they may not be driving to those, they may be taking public transportation, they may be at places like libraries where people go frequently. So I just think you have to think about it from an equity issue, and how people are able to cast that ballot is not the same as how people are doing it in North Arlington. So I just hope that the board takes that into consideration if this goes forward. Thanks.
Very important, and again, it's a registrar decision, but we can certainly have all this good information and have it channeled for an appropriate decision.
I'm curious about the workload of reviewing the video surveillance of the drop boxes. How many work hours are devoted to that?
That is something I will be, it's one of those questions that I'll answer when we can put a presentation together. I'm not prepared to answer questions.
Thank you. There's more questions.
I think it's also an education situation, because these were put up in the middle of the pandemic. And, you know, I know in the league, we scrambled to tell people they had it. And I think if we educate people more about the accessibility, the ease, the safety of them, which we do, those numbers will go up when people realize how easy it is to vote using a drop box. And so I think we need to all work on this.
Hi, I have a question. You said that by eliminating 6 of the drop boxes, that it would reduce the appearance of voter fraud. Have there been any examples of voter fraud using the drop boxes?
Not in Arlington. No. But again, I think it's a question of, it's just perception. If, again, we can discuss, is this a real convenience or not, given the other options that voter has, many of them. But there is a perception among many that that the drop boxes are associated with voter fraud. So this diminishes then the confidence of those individuals. So if they're really not needed from a practical point of view, we feel it could go a long way to just improving that kind of confidence in the electoral process.
Where is this
So
information?
the many are how many? Or have you taken a poll?
What do you mean?
You said many lack confidence.
Yeah.
What records do we have of that? How many? What do they say?
Yeah.
Because we've never heard any, so we're just curious.
I think these are all interesting questions. And so what we will do on my team is we'll go take some of these questions that have been raised today, and we'll prepare information that the board has asked for the next board meeting.
That'll be helpful, and I have 3 more thoughts.
Yeah.
If you could, and I know that there is just the one in Fairfax at the government center, but if you could check with your colleagues, it would be helpful ideally to know how many do every other jurisdiction, or as many as you can. How many do they have? And also looking at that in terms of the proportionate population compared to Arlington. And then also, if you could take a look, and just as you make certainly appropriate judgments about election officials, as we just went through that process, how you select those election officials who make the pickups. And then also, I'll make my periodic request to you, with which you've always been helpful. What is your degree of confidence and the latest timeline with respect to post office deliveries, particularly remembering the situation up at George Mason Station.
Yeah.
And last I brought that up, as I recall, you mentioned there were still, I believe, some issues to be resolved. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that, that was where it was found on surveillance that mail was being taken out of the outside, a couple of two boxes outside as you approach driving up there. I've used it myself, especially Christmas time. I didn't use it this time though,
Me too.
because of my lack of confidence, unfortunately, which I'd like to have resolved as far as when I place that mail, that it's going to stay in the box where I put it and go where it's intended. So if you could help us on that, that would be good. And as part of that, what is the timeline? Might be concerned going back several years, we discussed that. I remembered reading that it may have been in the Sun Gazette or otherwise, where it was 5 to 8 days within the county. And then, as I recall, last time I raised it, last year, you mentioned it was 2 to 3. I appreciate that. And certainly, as far as any, as you consult with your colleagues around the Commonwealth, if you could help us as well on, as the question was raised here appropriately about fraud. Has there been any suggestion of fraud? Any, and if so, what was done? Certainly, if that were the case in Arlington, the same as we have occasionally had issues with voter fraud at the polls, I'm certain that you would, and we would certainly want the Commonwealth's attorney to be involved immediately and prosecute. So that's a lot of work. Will be appreciated.
If I could, I might add some follow-up questions to that, Scott, just
Sure,
to
of
see
course.
how far should I limit my searches? How far back are we going?
I was gonna ask, Frank, would you be able to send me your breakdown of that $143 per day, just so I can make sure how it looks on our end, so we can make sure about that? Thank you.
And along with that, and I'll be done, I promise, that cost, and as Madam Chair mentioned, the cost to take them down, store them. Also, if the number of the boxes were to be reduced, what would you recommend with respect to signage to let people know, who've been going there since 2023, that that's not an option and where they should go? And why? So again, we certainly want to make certain everybody has an appropriate opportunity to vote, and the integrity of the process is important to all of us. Anyone else here have any, Madam Chair?
I just have a question for clarification. Is it required that the drop boxes be available for the full 45-day period?
No.
But they are at the moment, at this time, we're doing them. I just was curious. Thank you.
One former speaker used to say, my last final question. If the number, just again thinking of all the options, if the number were to be reduced, does it make sense to have the drop boxes at locations where there is the early voting? Or does it make sense to not do that, given that other opportunity? Does it make sense to have them only at locations where we don't have the early voting? Again, just trying to be as inclusive and thoughtful as possible.
I have a question for Gretchen on that. Maybe somebody else knows. Does Fairfax have satellite locations for early voting?
Yes.
Yes.
By what rationale do they interpret the code to not require them to have drop boxes as opposed to satellite
They
locations?
do have them.
They have them. They're interior drop boxes, not 24/7 drop boxes.
Okay. So they're like the blue bags that we get?
Yes, correct.
Those are a little bit more
Could I
sturdy.
just make a quick comment? So then to follow up on what Scott was saying, if one were to keep the 44-day whatever drop boxes exterior at a place like Walter Reed where we do the in-person early voting, there really is not a whole lot of correlation between interior and outer, because we limit the numbers of hours and days for the in-person voting at a place like Walter Reed, depending on which election it is. But that 44 days, 24 hours a day is a very long period and a great period for people to drop their, and to know that that is a place where a lot of people know where it is, they know how to park there, or they know how to get there by bus or whatever. So I wouldn't say that because one would want to spread out where those drop boxes are, that one wouldn't necessarily want to continue the pattern of doing it at a place like Walter Reed.
Right.
Because you're allowing people a great deal of time beyond the hours of in-person early voting to drop their box off at a place that's commonly known. So,
And then since you mentioned yours truly, I'm just thinking of the options.
yeah, right, exactly. And mine just was a follow-up comment.
Yes, and I just to clarify what I had in mind in terms of Fairfax. Indeed, as I know, Gretchen knows the one I'm talking about in Fairfax is the one that's outside the government center.
Yeah.
Which is a huge box, which is certainly easily accessible from the parking lot is appropriate.
Gretchen, I have a comment and a question. My comment is that I would like you to consider whether only accepting request to opt out of being on the permanent absentee list by internet is an equity issue.
It's an equity issue. That's where for anybody who we don't have email addresses from, keep in mind with the way we have the email addresses is they put that on their absentee ballot application as a method to communicate with them. So anybody that doesn't have an email address, we would still go make the effort to notify them and give them the same message. It's just the numbers, a vast majority of them, we did have an email address for them so that we can really reduce the budget to notify people.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And my question has to do with ranked choice voting.
Yes.
In your example, we had 99 voters.
Yes.
And if somebody hits 34, then they're elected.
Yes.
If they get 44 votes, which 10 votes out of the 44 get redistributed?
To make it equitable, that's where you go look at all of those 44 votes and you go to look at the next choice candidate for all 44 ballots and you take a fraction of that second choice to apply it to their next choice. That fraction is determined by taking the number of extra votes that candidate received. So in your case, if it were 44 votes, he got 10 votes over the threshold that he needed. And we would divide that by the total number for the candidate office, so that would be 44. So the fraction of the vote that we would take is that 10 over 44. Does that make sense?
Taken from each vote.
Taken from each of the 44 votes. We're gonna take, I can't reduce 10 over 44 in my head that easily, to 520 seconds.
So if candidate A got 44 votes.
Yeah.
Then if you look at the second choice of those 44.
Yes. Not necessarily the second choice, but it'd be the next choice.
Because they could all have different second choices.
Because they might have hit 44 after the first round.
Round one, the candidate.
I know, I've
has
lost
30.
everyone, I apologize.
Only in round two do they get to 44, so now you're on the people's third choices, that's what Gretchen was saying.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
it'd be
always
their
gonna be
next
their
choice.
But if
second.
they got to
You
round
can't say second.
44 on round one.
In round one,
Then
then
it's
it would
their
be then it would just be their second choice. You'd go to whatever the choice was after candidate A on the ballot.
There's a
But
really,
second choice,
But that's
of
only
which
in multiple
10 voters
candidate-
would get.
But that's what I'm saying, you look at all 44 ballots and you're gonna take a fraction. That fraction in the scenario you presented is 520 seconds of the and you would take, the first ballot had candidate C, you would, instead of that candidate C getting a full one vote, it's only going to get a fraction, so it'd be 520 seconds of that vote.
I see.
Yeah.
So
everyone's
candidate B got 2/3 of the second choice and candidate C got 1/3 of the second choice.
Every next choice is gonna get the same fraction, you just, like I
see.
said.
Thank you.
There are videos, like I said, this is part of that outreach campaign. We are creating videos, and there are resources out there that make it simpler, and we're gonna use simple numbers to help people understand the math and not get to a fraction that's 5/20 seconds, because that's really hard. So,
Thank you very much.
okay,
And be assured, these are all good questions.
they
It
are.
reminds me of the work session we had with the county board. And I imagine they were sitting there considering all this and figuring out how they would have done it if they had won their seats with ranked choice questions.
Yeah.
Hey, that's only in a case like, say, the county board races this year where there's multiple seats.
Yes, that's correct.
Like in a one seat race, you don't have to worry about all this.
No, you just, the threshold is 50% plus one, so.
And if I may, because we, Madam Chair, because we had a good question here about fraud, Frank, you've done such good research in which you were a part of, certainly a paper that was presented to us this time last year. If you could do whatever you could, Frank, to see if there have been any reported instances of fraud and what prosecution or other action ensued, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Just like to maybe close out this, but just to remind that of the 6 drop boxes of the 9 that had the least amount of votes, we're talking about 4 ballots per day. So
That's 4 ballots.
just in terms of efficiencies, and if we're trying to save some money, I mean, just keep that in mind. So, okay. So we.
Do you want to speak in public session, Joan, or do you want to get me afterwards?
I just want to ask about the permanent drop-off, the permanent.
Absentee ballot list.
Is it required by law that you send that out?
No.
Okay, because I'm thinking, why would you want to get off? I don't want to get off.
Part of it, so part of it is, what happened in 2020. A lot of what we do is a reaction to, whatever happened previously. So, in 2020, we didn't have a mechanism in place to notify voters that we had accepted their, request for a mail ballot. And, they spent all summer sending us applications for their mail ballot, wondering why they hadn't gotten their mail ballot yet. And so we would, in some cases, get 3, 4, 5 applications from voters, and each one of those had to be processed. So part of the benefit of notifying them in advance of the election, so like I said, ballots for this election go out around May 5th. So we'd probably start communicating with voters in April. It's mainly to let them know that they do not need to reapply if they are already on the list, and if they, for some reason, their circumstances have changed, maybe they've moved and they haven't notified us that they've moved yet, we can try to catch any of those things prior to those ballots being mailed out. So,
Okay, that
yeah.
makes sense. I thought you were encouraging people to get off the list.
And like I said, we do have a lot of voters who, when they apply to vote by mail, they don't necessarily know that they're applying to be on the permanent absentee ballot list. And so, like I said, it is still a new thing. So like I said, we want to make sure we're getting,
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and that we're presenting them with that option, like if they change their mind and they don't want to get a mail ballot, here's the option, here's how you
go
about being removed from that list.
Madam Chair, this conversation reminds me of another one that I heard in Richmond when a bill came up that would eliminate the list. Delegate mentioned that he'd heard from many constituents who had no idea how they wound up on the list.
Yeah.
Recognizing the voters had chosen it, especially that they don't remember. So.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah,
would
it's an
be
That is not an
So-
unusual situation, have people come in on election day as chief officer.
Yeah.
And say, I never got you tell them, well, you got an absentee ballot, and they're like, no, I didn't.
So
And
again,
you
it's
tell
an
them you're on the
educational
list, and they're like, why am I on the list? I didn't want to be on the list, like.
I would say in some cases, I know this might be hard to believe, sometimes voters aren't always as honest as. So. They're forgetful, yeah. So, but that is the purpose of the notification. It's one, to reduce them from reapplying, to let them know that their ballot is going to be mailed and when it's going to be mailed. And then if they are wintering in Florida, they can fill out the application to get their ballots into Florida as opposed to Arlington. Like I said, it is a larger notification than just if you want to be removed.
Okay, because I was like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. on that note, I'm going to wrap the meeting up. It's 10:32.
If I could just ask
Yes.
one quick thing, Madam Chair, and that
Yes.
is, Gretchen, your post-election report was excellent.
Yes.
It was so good that I wanted to suggest, if you haven't done so already, if you could have a copy that you deliver to each one of the county board members
Oh, okay.
and the manager.
Yeah.
I thought about that when I read Scott McCaffrey's excellent piece about a post-election report that had been presented by Secretary Kate Hanley to the Fairfax board. And I thought instantly of the report that you prepared. It's so well done that I think that if you could do that annually, that would be good. And certainly send it to anyone else of whom you can think who wants to know the great job this office does and the integrity of our process.
Absolutely.
Kim, before you conclude the meeting, what if I could ask a quick question that other people might be curious about too? I got two wonderful oversized postcards in the mail from your office. One notified me about my change of polling site for November. That was great. I also got another one that I think came after that, which gave me my new names or numbers of the different districts that I'm going to vote for in 2023. I checked with a lot of my colleagues and they claimed they did not get it.
Okay.
Are you going to be doing one like this during the early part of 2023 this year?
I do not have it in my budget to send another one like that in 2023. I can certainly talk to you. So that card was provided by the Department of Elections. It was not provided by our office.
So that came directly from Richmond, if you will.
Yeah.
But it should have gone to all registered voters in Arlington.
If they were registered to vote as of they pulled the files in August, then it should have gone to every registered voter.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of longtime voters in Arlington who claim they never saw it, they never got one like that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It was
That
really
size.
easy to miss.
I
almost
see
threw
it
mine
right
away.
now.
Because the kids
Yeah,
got caught up in junk mail.
And once, like I said, that one was from the Department of Elections, and the design of it is one that, like I said, we did not put together, so.
Because it's not very postcardy, it's kind of papery and it got.
You're right.
I told people,
Yeah.
I think that's what happened, but they swear up and down they never
No,
got
they
it.
got it.
Whatever.
So one of the things, like I said, we have, part of notifying voters about November's election, I hate to say it, but it does hinge on ranked choice voting. So should we move forward, should the county board decide to move forward with ranked choice voting in November's election, once again, that's something they would decide in June or July. But I have requested that if that does happen, that we do put a full mailer out to every voter in Arlington. So that request is in, contingent on the future ranked choice voting.
So that
And
gives
they would be
you the
very
same-
easy to add which district you're in. Yep.
Thank you, great.
So,
Just one more quick comment, I want to also compliment Gretchen's office for the work the last election. We had our hall washers out and others, and the workload that was created due to the same day registration and to the electoral board too, who had to deal with all the provisional ballots and everything. And the precinct recording, which is no small task that had to be accounted for. So we feel it was a very well-run election, especially given all of those factors. That being said, we did have a stock taking workshop, and so we came up with these are kind of like very technical points, just small suggestions about maybe how the tables could be. And so I don't know if you want to go over them today, otherwise perhaps we could have a meeting in the future to just go over those with you and see if those would be helpful.
yeah, and we have, the suggestions were sent to us, so we do have them. So we'll certainly be looking into them. So,
Okay, maybe, yeah.
I have one suggestion, by the way. I worked as an election officer
Yeah.
at Madison Precinct in November. And I'll bet there were more than 100 people who came to Madison Precinct thinking that they could vote there because it had been
It's an
early
early
voting,
voting
and we had to tell them, sorry, you're at the wrong place.
Yes.
Luckily, nobody came at 10 minutes of 7
Yeah.
and had to go to a new place.
Yeah.
I know that you did your best to let people know that, no, you really have to vote in your own precinct, but that was a serious concern. And
It
it's something to be done in the
is,
future.
yeah, no, that is the early voting sites that we have seen since we started at these early voting sites or absentee in-person sites is that the confusion that they can just go there. It even happens here. They come into this building thinking they can vote on election day. And like I said, thankfully they're at one of the 3 precincts that's across the street and we can tell them which they need to go to. And we even put a poll book in the lobby to help kind of get them so they don't come all the way up here. But yeah, because you can vote for 45 days at this building, voters think that this building's a polling location on election day. So that's where, like I said, it's outreach education and letting voters know the laws of Virginia, especially when they're new to the area. So.
All right. 10:38, so I'm going to go ahead and adjourn. We will be meeting again in March, so we will let everyone know the date and time of the meeting. It is 10:38. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Great, thank you. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for the robust discussion today.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.